You're listening to chapters from Out of the Best Books, where curious and committed disciples of Jesus Christ come to find fresh insight and deeper conversations about the gospel. Each week we open a chapter from the Deseret Book Library to dive into. I'm your host, Cole Wissinger. The world's suffering can feel overwhelming. Wars, natural disasters, and cities stricken with poverty. And in the face of it all, it's easy to wonder how we can possibly chip away at such enormous problems. That's the question Sharon Eubank takes on in her book, Doing Small Things with Great Love: How Everyday Humanitarians Are Changing the World. Her message is powerful and hopeful for the average person who wants to make a difference. Sharon makes the case that true humanitarian service doesn't require a passport or a plane ticket. More often, it begins with what's right in front of you. Here's chapter 2, titled, You Are Most Powerful Where You Are.
I have a recurring dream that chokes me with fear and adrenaline. A soot-colored tide surges through palm trees skirted in ruffles of whitewater. A wave greedily devours neat rows of greenhouses and races on unsatisfied and ravenous across the land. It barrels toward the railroad track and the daily train to Gaul. The rusty red train cars have large windows. Women in colored saris lean out of the windows, accepting children into their arms and setting them down inside the train. Panicked farmers hand up more toddlers as the water rises. Surely the train on the high track will be the safest place. Then the greedy wave eats up the farmers and slams the train over and over again in the violent surf until it tumbles and floods. In the dream, the bodies of the women, with their saris covering their faces, float out the windows like a parade. In this dream, I'm powerless. I stand paralyzed and mute, unable to do anything or save anyone. The dream flows from a real experience, and the fact that it's still in my subconscious reveals how much the encounter changed me. In the aftermath of the 2004 catastrophic Southeast Asia tsunami, I went to Sri Lanka with a project to help fishermen and seamstresses get new work tools so they could go back to providing for their families. Every community we entered was filled with dank debris and people still deep in shock 5 months after the tragedy. When we came to the railroad tracks where the train to Gaul met its end, there were families camped all around the broken train. We got out of the vehicle, and the driver, Shanta, told me the story of what happened. I saw a white sheet tacked to the side of the train with writing painted on it, and Shanta read it to me. We now understand the power of the sea because it took our children from us. People soon came up to me and plucked at my sleeve or held my hand and said the only English words they knew. I lost my baby. I lost my husband. Help me. Please, please help me. I was at a loss. I didn't have any food to share. I couldn't speak their language to explain. I was in the country to try to help, but how could I tell them that fishermen were getting nets and boats, and seamstresses were getting machines and cloth? 900 houses were being built just over the rise from where we were, but what was that to them? Shanta went over to our vehicle and took out a soccer ball. Soon he was kicking it around with a mob of kids. They began to scuffle and laugh with him in the dirt. While he played with the ball, Shanta casually asked one woman how her bread making was turning out. She brought some bread for him to try. Another woman called to him that they couldn't find washing powder. He said he would try to find some for them. Standing there watching the scene, I recognized something I had never understood before. Shanta was more powerful than I was in this setting for very ordinary reasons. This was his home. He came consistently. He spoke the language. He understood the cultural dynamics. He could respond at a very personal human level. You are at your most powerful where you live. It's such an important principle. You are most powerful where you live. When you first hear that statement, it's easy to think of all the reasons it isn't true. Your first instinct is to say, my neighborhood doesn't need me the way they do in Ukraine or Sudan. But thinking it through, some realities are quickly evident. When it comes to making meaningful contributions to disasters that are far away, we are limited by distance, time, security, and knowledge. You might go to all the effort and expense to cross the ocean and arrive at the site of the disaster only to be turned away because it's too insecure for civilians, or because your presence is attracting negative attention, or because you're taking up desperately needed food, water, and shelter from the people you're trying to help. Even if you find a niche where you can do something useful, you'll stay for a week or two and then be gone again. These are the limitations. The next thought is, well, the least I can do is send things they need. It can be emotionally satisfying to think of something we are sure the people will need in their extremity, and then go to great lengths to gather and transport it. We're expending our energy commensurate to the scale of the disaster and to our empathy. But goods donated in a time of disaster can go horribly wrong. Let me give some examples. In 1998, Hurricane Mitch blasted with fury across Honduras. 11,000 people died, and more than 1.5 million people were left homeless. CBS Sunday Morning interviewed Juanita Rilling, who was the director of the Center for International Disaster Information in Washington, D.C. She related, "I got a call from one of our logistics experts who said that a plane full of supplies could not land because there was clothing on the runway. It's in boxes and bales. It takes up yards of space. It can't be moved." "Whose clothing is it?" he said. "Well, I don't know whose it is, but there's a high-heeled shoe, just one, and a bale of winter coats." And I thought, winter coats? It's summer in Honduras. In humanitarian circles, the tidal wave of unusable donations that clogs up the logistics is called the second disaster. Rilling also described how in 2004, following the Indian Ocean tsunami, a beach in Indonesia was piled high with used clothing that had been sent from abroad. There was no time for disaster workers to sort through and clean the old clothes to make them usable, so the contributions sat on the beach in the tropical sun, rotting. The huge pile became a toxic hazard, and there was no choice but to destroy it. Local officials poured gasoline on it and set it on fire, and then it was sent out to sea. These are shocking stories, but the second disaster is the reality in so many emergency settings. Dale Herzog is a logistical and supply chain engineer at the UPS Foundation. He tells of his experience in Sandy Hook after the 2012 elementary school shooting tragedy. Thousands of boxes of Christmas toys, school supplies, gifts, and clothing were sent to Newtown, Connecticut, along with over 500,000 cards, letters, and paper snowflakes. Something like 65,000 teddy bears were mailed there, more than 1,000 of them life-sized. It was a tremendous gesture of love from people around the world, but the logistical challenges presented by these gifts stretched residents to the breaking point. Newtown is a small, semi-rural town made up of villages with a total population of just 27,000. With its limited postal resources, many other public employees, EMS, police, firefighters, and volunteers from surrounding post offices had to be brought in to handle all that stuff. At one point, the donations occupied 80,000 square feet of floor space stacked tightly together and standing 8 feet high. During a time in which their community was struggling with unbearable grief, residents were forced to worry about what to do with this avalanche of packages, letters, and cards. His words sound brutal and uncaring, but they reflect a reality that has become disconnected from our good intentions. The gestures of goodwill offerings can simply be physically overwhelming. Dale shares a second story that occurred after the 2010 Haiti earthquake. There was the company that sent 10 full shipping containers of refrigerators, hundreds of fridges, to Haiti after the 2010 earthquake. It may sound generous until you realize that most of the survivors were living in tents without electricity, and none of the appliances were wired to work in that country. Early in my career, my organization routinely shipped hygiene kits and medical supplies by ocean container to support different projects. Community groups would donate the equipment or assemble the kits, and then we would box and label them, load them onto pallets, and ship them across the ocean in 40-foot containers. The transit usually took 8 weeks, and each container cost between $6,000 and $8,000. A large portion of my job was negotiating with customs officials in the ports who were holding the shipments for legitimate or sometimes non-legitimate reasons to get the containers released. Sometimes we paid large storage fees until the containers were cleared. Other times the difficulties could not be resolved and the shipment had to be abandoned or shipped back. Very often, by the time the containers arrived at their destinations, we had spent more money getting them on location than the contents were worth inside. In light of these experiences, we began exploring ways to purchase items locally and deliver them within a few days. Many believed it was still cost-effective to receive higher quality donations not available in local markets, or that local purchases would discourage our volunteer base who assembled the kits. But I discovered otherwise. The equipment purchased locally was already calibrated with the right electrical plugs and voltage, and it also came with a warranty and a referral to a local technician if repairs were needed. We began directing interested volunteers toward more local opportunities that needed their expertise, and in the long run, the new practice proved to be much more sustainable than shipping in equipment from other countries. Several years after making the strategic switch to local purchases, I stood in the shade of an Amman, Jordan garden, putting toothpaste and shampoo into bags with women from the local Presentation of Our Lord Greek Orthodox Church and Arabic language students from the university. These neighbors were assembling supplies to be delivered to the Zatri Syrian refugee camp. The mood was festive. They had done some hard bargaining in the local souk to get good prices for the supplies, with etiquettes I could not begin to understand. Vendors were happy, the neighborhood volunteers were enjoying getting to know each other, and everyone hoped the Syrians crossing the border in the next few days would feel relief receiving the needed items. I remember thinking that this project cost 1/3 the price of a shipping container. It rallied neighbors who didn't traditionally interact to an enjoyable afternoon activity. The contents would be familiar to the recipients, the camp officials would receive what they had requested, and it was to be distributed the next day at the border. Dale recommends asking 3 questions before collecting and shipping humanitarian items. Number 1, is this stuff wanted? Have the people on the ground decided what is necessary and in which order it should arrive? Number 2, how will this stuff get there? And who will pay the cost? Number 3, how will the stuff get distributed after it arrives at its destination? Those are very simple questions that delve right into the heart of the practical realities of location, and many people answering those questions will make a pivot toward cash as a more flexible and useful donation in a disaster. It is nearly always preferred by the agencies working on the ground. Cash is nimble. It supports vendors in the local economy. It can be quickly deployed elsewhere when the situation changes. But it can also seep away in corruption and be hard for donors to track. Credible organizations have robust ways of tracking and reporting where the cash goes. When you want to help in a specific situation, it's critical to know these realities and the unintended consequences so you can determine your best move. It may be a hard truth that we cannot do much in conflict or disaster zones far away, besides donate money to organizations who are on the ground. But there's much that we can do in our own towns that will change lives. It's a myth that you are more needed in Dar es Salaam than you are in Des Moines, Iowa. The problems are simply different. Shanta was powerful because he was consistently present, he spoke the language, he understood and interpreted cultural cues, and he could build trusted relationships of encouragement, something that no amount of money can do. Let me share some additional stories about others like Shanta who created powerful relief because they possessed invaluable local tools. Consistently present. In a city just south of where I live, a woman lost her husband in an unexpected accident. She had 3 young children and very little means to support them. She was filled with grief and paralyzed by despair. She received a donation to help her finish her education, but there were many other barriers. One day, not long after the funeral, an older woman from the neighborhood came to the woman's home and told her, "I don't have any money to give you, but I have time. I will come each day and watch the children while you go to school." The 2 agreed on a plan, and 5 days a week this good woman came each morning. While the widow went to the local university full-time, the older woman helped get the children ready for school, drove them where they needed to be, helped them with their homework, and made a hot meal for the evening. For 2 years. More than a babysitter, she became the wise, confident friend the family needed as they mourned the absence of their father and husband. It took enormous, consistent commitment and a suspension of her own activities by this woman, but it forever changed the lives of 4 other people. Speak the language. Speaking the language can be broader than the local dialect. Vesta Stout created a household tool and saved lives because she spoke Navy. In 1943, Vesta's two sons were both serving in the Navy during World War II, and she was working in an ordnance plant near Amboy, Illinois. Her job was to inspect rifle cartridges packed into boxes. After the inspection, the boxes were taped closed with a thin paper tape and then dipped in wax to make them waterproof for the damp conditions in the field. To open the box, soldiers would pull on the tab of tape and it was supposed to rip through the wax, but the paper tape was not strong enough and often broke off, leaving the soldiers to claw open the box of ammunition under enemy fire. Vesta understood this flaw was putting lives at risk, including her sons, so she put her ingenuity to work. She experimented combining cotton duck cloth with glue and designed a strong, waterproof tape that met the field requirements. Her samples impressed the military inspectors, but she could not get the supply chain in the military to change to the new tape. So Vesta wrote to the commander-in-chief. When President Franklin Delano Roosevelt received her energetic letter that included sketches of the problem, he contacted the War Production Board in Washington, D.C. Shortly, Vesta had a letter saying her recommendation for the new tape had been approved. Johnson & Johnson, already making surgical tape for the military, received the contract to manufacture Vesta's idea, and they called it duck tape because it was waterproof like a duck and it was made with cotton duck fabric. Vesta saw a specific need and responded, but she was effective because she understood the difficulties of the soldiers in the field and spoke the language of the military bureaucracy. She positioned her idea in the chain of command to quickly get it where it could do the most good. Cultural expertise. Milton Collins is the principal of Lincoln Elementary School in South Salt Lake. The year I visited him, he had students from 15 countries enrolled. The Hamid brothers from Syria had just arrived in the city and were at school on the first day. They were visibly nervous and very unsure about how they would be received. Principal Collins greeted them and their mother in the hall. He made sure the brothers had a backpack with the supplies they would need that day from the closet. He told the boys high fives were mandatory whenever they saw him in the hall. He directed them to go straight to an adult if they had a question or experienced bullying of any kind. Milton Collins' job was to be a principal, but he went beyond his job to be a cultural guide for students on a day when guidance was badly needed. He knew he could be an unforgettable force for good in the lives of kids who had experienced bombs, hunger, death of loved ones, uncertainty, and now fear over whether they would fit in on the first day of school. Whenever there is a problem, the first thing Principal Collins does is invite everyone to meet face-to-face. His experience is that unintended cultural misunderstandings get in the way and problems can't be sufficiently ironed out over email or phone calls. Milton says, "We gotta talk. Emails and text messages are completely different from face-to-face. The only way we fix it is to sit down and have a conversation. Every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story." Trusted relationships of encouragement. I met Janet Hatch in 2023 in my neighborhood. She had been a beloved first-grade teacher for many years while she raised her 4 children as a single mom. A failed back surgery created an intense pain feedback loop that confined her to her bed or recliner. She described it as a full-body spasm that never let go. Janet knew her life would be cut short. She loved family history and had so many stories inside her head that she wanted to share with her grandchildren. She tried dictation apps, but her voice wasn't strong enough for the app to work well. She tried having friends come type for her, but they weren't always available when she had the energy. She intensely wished she could do it herself, but she had only enough strength to type on her iPad for about 15 minutes each day. She was feeling sorry for herself and her dreams when a voice inside her head said, "Just start." In the brief 10 to 15 minutes she had each day, Janet wrote 23 books. They were bound and spread out on her coffee table, filled with her insights and photos, memories and wisdom. Janet knew she wouldn't leave much of an inheritance, but she distilled all her inner wealth in 15-minute increments into an individual book for each member of her family, describing how she felt about their births and reassuring them for their futures. She finished the last book for her as-yet unborn granddaughter and then passed away, having given a powerful gift of specific, personal encouragement that no one else could give. Of course it's harder to work where you live. It's harder because we understand the dynamics and real barriers that may be invisible to us in unfamiliar cultures and places. Are there exceptions? Absolutely. Carefully organized, self-sufficient groups who come at a requested time into a disaster area to help clean up or rebuild can be a boon to the affected community. But the exceptions prove the rule. What about organized humanitarian trips and travel? It's important to recognize what a trip can and cannot accomplish. A foreigner spending a limited amount of time in a village cannot expect to spark structural change that reduces poverty. But expanding the person's worldview and empathy is not insignificant. Trips can definitely be about connection, learning, and exchange. They can be especially important for young people who are developing empathy and forming opinions about the world. But they can easily slip into inadvertent patronizing, which makes everybody poorer. If you decide to participate in a humanitarian trip, ask yourself, how am I different because of this experience? What surprised me? Which skills do the people have that I don't? Do the issues that I observed on my trip exist in some form in my own community? What will I do differently now that I've made this trip? How will I keep the personal connection and friendships? In the end, you yourself are the gift. It isn't the clothing, the hygiene kits, the school desks, or the wells. It's you. It's the connection and relationships you make. I envision each person as a well-stocked humanitarian organization, but instead of giving out tangible goods in foreign locations, we dispense as our humanitarian offerings the richness of healing, friendship, respect, peaceful dialogue, sincere interest, protective care for children, birthday remembrances, and taking care of the stranger right where we live. Anyone can do this type of humanitarian work at any time. It doesn't require warehouses or fundraising or transportation. You can be perfectly responsive to any need that comes to you wherever you are. If we change our perspective so that caring for other people is less about giving things away and more about filling a hunger for human connection, holding meaningful conversations, and building rich, positive relationships, which doors would open to us? What suffering would be relieved? Every person can live this kind of humanitarian life, but it takes vision and commitment to recognize the humanitarian opportunity at any moment of any day. Of course, some people may not respond positively to what you offer. There are always humanitarian places we cannot yet reach, but there are plenty we can reach. We are most powerful where we live.
That was Chapter 2 of Doing Small Things with Great Love, How Everyday Humanitarians Are Changing the World. It's brand new and you can get your hands on a copy at your local Deseret book. You can also listen to this book and explore the entire Deseret Book audio and ebook collection in the Deseret Bookshelf Plus app. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next time with another chapter pulled, as always, from out of the best books.